Welcome into the Tech Ed Podcast. This is your host, Matt Kirkner. It is fantastic to have you with us as we live stream on YouTube from the Association for Career and Technical Education annual conference. They call it CareerTech Vision. Here in 2022, we are live from the city of Las Vegas at the Las Vegas Convention Center. So much energy, so much excitement. 6,000 attendees at this amazing conference and people sharing all kinds of best practices, all kinds of ideas in career technical education. If you were with us yesterday, you know that we were live streaming all day yesterday as well. We had some phenomenal guests, some people that are leading the Association for Career and Technical Education. We had, in one case, somebody leading a large third-party certification body. We have career tech educators, all kinds of people influencing the future of career technical education at a time when there has probably been no more energy around career and technical education than there is today. One of the people that is feeding off of that energy is our guest today. He is the incoming president, actually the president-elect for the Association for Career and Technical Education. His name is Dr. Chaney Mosley. He's also an assistant professor at Middle Tennessee State University. And Chaney, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
We're going to have a great conversation. I know you've got to feel the energy too here at ACTE, at Career Tech Vision, right? Are you feeling just all the incredible ideas and thoughts and all the electricity kind of flowing through the conference here?
There's a lot of energy, and it comes from a lot of reasons. You've already discussed, I think, previously that this is the largest vision conference that we've had in 20 years.
Isn't that crazy?
When you have nearly 6,000 people coming to education in a place like Las Vegas, you can't help but feel the energy and the enthusiasm around that.
And I love the word that you use in the form of celebrate. It does feel like a celebration. In fact, there's probably no better city in the whole country to celebrate than Las Vegas, Nevada. But it does feel like a celebration, celebrating all of these great things that people are doing in the end to benefit students' lives. So here at the Tech Ed Podcast, we say that our mission is to secure the American dream for the next generation of STEM and workforce talent. The great work that ACTE is doing is such a huge part of that, and we're going to get more in depth into ACTE in just a minute. But before we do that, Chaney, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your role at Middle Tennessee State University and the Tennessee STEM Education Center. So let's start there.
Sure. So at Middle Tennessee State University, I am an assistant professor of agricultural education. That means that I train future agriculture teachers, and agriculture is, Agriculture, Food, and Natural Resources is one of the 16 national career clusters. So my background is in agriculture education. I taught middle and high school agriculture for 7 years before moving into other roles related to career and tech ed. In addition to working with future agriculture teachers, I'm an associate director at the Tennessee STEM Education Center at Middle Tennessee State University.
Okay.
And we focus on pre-K through 16 STEM education. We conduct high-quality research and engage in high-quality STEM outreach, and we provide a lot of teacher professional development through that center as well.
Give us an example on the research side. I think when we think about STEM research, what would encompass STEM research?
Well, it's STEM education research,
okay.
And I'll give you a great example.
Sure.
So there's this notion of this concept of deeper learning, which helps students take more from the classrooms. But in order to facilitate deeper learning, teachers have to design their instruction or their lessons in a way that is different maybe than the ways in which they were trained in their teacher preparation program. So one current project that we have is the Deeper Learning Institute, where we provided professional development through a week-long institute last summer with nearly 40 career and technical education teachers. They did a pre-survey, a post-survey, and then they went and developed a unit-based lesson plan in the form of a project-based lesson that has an authentic audience incorporating a lot of technology. We have received their lesson plans, they're implementing them now, but we are scoring those lesson plans, and then their students will take an exit test, and we will be able to determine the level of learning in students who experienced deeper learning versus those who did not. So we're excited about that, just to show the power of deeper learning and project-based learning.
So I come from the world of manufacturing, and you're always trying to figure out how do you do things more effectively, how do you do things more efficiently, how do we take a production line, for example, and take waste out of it, take constraints that are constraining the flow of that manufactured product. In your case, kind of doing the same thing with the education process, it sounds like. Let's experiment with a bunch of different processes and approaches. Let's gather a ton of data, and let's see what works best. Midwest. And it doesn't necessarily mean that there's any one single way to teach STEM education, but to gather all those best practices and find out what's working as effectively as possible and then combine those. Is that kind of the goal of the research?
Well, absolutely. And we are specifically focused on agricultural educators right now, but we hope to expand the project to include more career and technical educators. But focusing on one context is really important first, and then we'll work on the expansion.
Absolutely. Well, we'll look forward to hearing about the future, and maybe on a future episode of the Tech Ed Podcast,
Sure.
hear about some of that expansion in the world of STEM education research. Really fascinating stuff. You know, the other thing that's fascinating to me, obviously the energy and the celebration, as you put it here at CareerTech, or at the CareerTech Vision, rather, 2022. The energy, but also kind of a tricky time for the world of CTE, for continuing technical education, for STEM education. Now, you've already mentioned it. You've got just a great background in the world of education. You've been a teacher, you've been an administrator, an assistant professor, nearly every level of education. You've done the consulting work on the state and national level. So as we think about CTE and as much energy and as much excitement as we're seeing here at CareerTech Vision, what are some of the challenges that are facing the world of CTE today?
When I think of career and technical education and the challenges we face, the one that is right in front of me is teacher recruitment and teacher retention.
Yep.
And that's not only in my field of agricultural education, that's across the board. Without individuals in the classroom to provide high quality hands-on instruction for students, then we're not engaging in career and technical education. We're not setting students up for post-secondary success.
Sure.
So I think that's one of the biggest challenges that career and tech ed faces. I'm happy to talk about some of the possible ways that we can address those challenges if you'd like to hear more.
No,
about
I think we
that.
should get into that. So, and we've, frankly, not the first guest that has mentioned that. I think we all know that. I mentioned yesterday on the show that I live in the state of Wisconsin. I think we've got something on order of 250 just technical education jobs open in the state of Wisconsin, and we have a great university that produces talent to fill those jobs, but they're producing 7-10 people a year. Maybe last year a few more than that, but the numbers are way mismatched. So I think we have to take a new approach to how we create the next generation of STEM and tech ed teachers. Technology careers aren't changing at all. They're not going away. If anything, that ball is getting, or that goal is getting further and further away from us as technology advances, and we have to make sure that we're preparing our students at every level of education for these just crazy and amazing careers that are coming down the pike. But as we think about that, and as you consider this just really acute teacher shortage that we're dealing with, what are some of the things, Chaney, that you think we should be doing to address that?
One thing that I believe we need to do is innovate and become creative about the ways in which we recruit talent to career and technical education. But recruiting talent is often paired with state policy regarding teacher licensure, right? Some of the enforcement, where there's not a teacher preparation program formally embedded into the four-year institution. But in fact, those areas in many states, most states, do not require a four-year degree for some of the fields, and in some, they do require the four-year degree, but they also require a significant amount of experience so that you can come to the classroom. But it's incorrect to assume that just because someone has industry experience that they can then step into the classroom and impart their knowledge and their experiences on others. So providing high-quality teacher professional development, like we're doing here at ACTE CareerTech Vision, is one opportunity to do that. But it's critically important that state education agencies and local education agencies and even individual schools think creatively about the ways in which we mentor new teachers and provide them with the support that they need so that they can be successful and hopefully stay in the classroom for the long term.
As you're talking about that, it takes me back to a story from my days in manufacturing, and that was we started a mentoring program at one of our manufacturing plants. So we had been dealing in manufacturing with the shortage of skilled talent for at least a decade, in some cases even more than that. So one of the ideas that we came up with was having a mentor program. So we would pair somebody who was really good at fill in the blank, really good at machining, really good at CNC programming, really good at mechanical maintenance, and then pair them with somebody who was new, with the idea that the experienced individual would teach the inexperienced individual their trade. And what we found is that the vast majority of the people, I guess we maybe mistakenly thought it was easy, that you could just take somebody and say, here, teach so-and-so how you do what you do. Well, the truth of the matter is, to your point, teaching is an art form, and it's a skill that is honed over tremendous amounts of experience and tremendous amounts of learning, and not everybody is a natural teacher. And even those who are still have to learn the craft of education in so many ways. So that was the lesson that we learned on the manufacturing side, which is yes, there is an art to education. You just can't take an experienced person, put them in a classroom, and expect them to be able to impart knowledge effectively.
Well, what I will say is a successful example of a unique or innovative way of onboarding teachers exists in my own home state. So Tennessee has an apprenticeship program. An apprenticeship is often thought of in the world of work as skilled trades, but
Sure.
rarely before the last few years has it been discussed in the notion of teacher education. And
Yep.
so in our apprenticeship program, teachers are paired and work alongside master teachers or certified teachers, those who are already in the classroom. So they're not put in a classroom with 25 to 30 students by themselves, thumbs up, good luck,
Right.
See you at the end of the day. They're actually working alongside a trained teacher. They're observing, they're watching the modeling, and then they're practicing while that mentor teacher, that apprenticeship coach, we'll call it, is providing coaching and direction and saying, here's an opportunity to improve what happened, why, facilitating those questions, the reflective thought process. And, the jury's still out. It's a relatively new program. It has certainly improved opportunities for teacher recruitment, retention. Well, we'll see.
Right. Yeah, and let's talk a little deeper about teacher recruitment. Have you put some thought into, not only why maybe people aren't selecting the profession of teaching in the numbers that they used to, and what we do about addressing the number of people that are interested in the profession?
Yeah, absolutely. First, I think I want to talk about the benefits of teaching.
Go ahead.
Being a teacher provides many benefits, and this is one thing that folks may or may not often think about. In most cases, teaching is a 9-month position. You can spread your paycheck out over 12 months, but you get that summer break off. And for working families, for adults with children who are school age, that's a really difficult benefit to find in another career opportunity.
sure.
You get the same breaks as your children, so
Right.
that's a good one. The other one is the feeling. It's a very altruistic career, I believe. You're doing things for the greater good. You're part of something that is beyond yourself. And when you enter a career in tech ed, or probably any teaching position, you're constantly reminded of the good work that you do from your students, from other teachers, from the parents of your students, and from community members. I've worked in other areas that took me outside of the classroom, and that's what I miss, and that's what brought me back into the classroom as an educator now, because I didn't have that sense of accomplishment, that pat on the back that tells me, hey, I know it may be tough, you may be stressed, the workload may be high right now, but you're doing a good job and you're making a difference, and I think that's incredible.
Absolutely.
So when we think about recruitment, I think these are some of the things that we need to discuss and help folks understand the opportunities that do exist. But why are people not entering a career in education? One of the challenges is media, right?
Okay.
We hear a lot about what's happening in classrooms across America, the challenges that teachers experienced during the pandemic. The kid load one video of one bad thing that may have
Right.
happened in a school, and that entire school is branded as a dangerous place. You can't work here.
Yep.
And so I think that we're often influenced by what we see and what we hear, and not by
Out there, and you're exactly right. You take that one little 45-second snippet in what could be an entire semester or even longer, and try and brand the profession of teaching around that one little period of time. And we really do need to do a better job of talking about all the benefits of teaching and all the benefits of being an educator. I like to challenge people to think about, and everybody comes up with them. I'll say, think about your 3 teachers that influenced you in some way, put you on a path you wouldn't have otherwise been on, showed you that you had a skill or a competency that you didn't know, or an aptitude that you didn't know that you had. I have my 3, probably more than that. Everybody can answer that question.
Sure.
And so then you think about the opportunity to actually be the individual, who is part of imparting that knowledge and part of creating that inspiration, and that is really, really cool. So just awesome. Go ahead.
I will say some of the other some of the other challenges that we experience include salary. So
Sure.
as I said, it's a 9-month position, and some may say, well, you're overcompensated because you're only working 9 months and that's the salary that you get, right? Some think the teacher salary is too low. I think that we could always elevate teacher salaries,
Sure.
and I'll tell you why. I view teachers as leaders, right? We think of folks in business administration who may be supervising teams of 50 to 75 people. One classroom teacher supervises between 100 and 150 students
Right.
a day. This actually objectives, assessing their performance and coaching them along the way. The skills that are needed by leaders in industry. And so we love partnering with industry. Sometimes industry poaches some of our
Right.
best teachers, and
Yep.
that's one of the challenges that we experience related to retention.
Yeah, absolutely. One, and as much as we live in a free market economy, a lot of times those jobs might even pay more on the, in the private sector, in the in the world of industry than
Sure.
they did in teaching. And so it makes a really good point when you've got those phenomenal teachers that are able to be so good at what they do to inspire all these students, to put them on these new paths.
School systems and state departments of education as
Sure.
well. If we can become more flexible with the ways in which we utilize the talents of teachers, and that's helpful. So models where we may only have a teacher who is part-time. They don't need the benefits, but they want to teach, but only 2 days a week.
Right.
That's better than not having a teacher in the classroom. But when you talk to many principals about that, it blows their minds. They can't conceptualize the notion that I may only have someone who comes in 2 days a week, and they may only be there for half a day on each of those 2 days.
Right.
Then that I don't have someone to do bus duty in the morning or parking lot duty in the afternoon. They're not attending my faculty meetings. But so I think that there's an incredible opportunity to become more flexible with the ways in which we provide education and utilize the talents of teachers.
Absolutely. We had the superintendent of the school district of St. Paul in Minnesota on with us about a year ago. Dr. Joe Gothard is his name. And he talked about the fact that in his view, we really hadn't changed the way that we teach students and changed the typical classroom in many cases since the 1950s. And that really, for whatever reason, stuck with me. I think I went to grade school in the 1970s, high school in the 1980s, and I go to my kids' schools, and they look a lot like they did when I was there, right? And then you ask somebody who went to school in the 50s, and they're like, yeah, it really hasn't changed as much as maybe it should. So to your point, finding new and innovative ways to do this, opening up our minds a little bit to what might be possible, really important work. And by the way, some of the work that's going on right here at ACTE with the opening people's minds to what the future of career technical education looks like. You're the president-elect. I understand your term is going to start in July, so about 6-7 months from now. Let's start with teacher involvement in ACTE. Is there a role that ACTE plays in teacher retention, in obviously sharing best practices, professional development, and so on? Talk a little bit about why a CTE teacher or educator for that matter, would want to be involved in this organization.
Yeah, I think having a professional learning community or being part of a community of practice is critically important to teacher retention.
Right, and we tell, by the way, our manufacturing folks that a PLC in this case is a professional learning community, not a programmable logic controller, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, and PTO is parent-teacher organization, not paid time off.
There you go.
Because
right.
that also doesn't exist in education. But I think that ACTE and other education organizations similar to ACTE can often facilitate or provide that PLC or that learning environment where folks can find peers, maybe in the same state, and maybe they're across the country,
Sure.
with whom they can collaborate, share ideas, and feel like they are part of something with 20 to 30 people who are younger than you,
right?
So I think it's critically important that organizations like ACTE give educators an opportunity to either in person or virtually step outside the classroom and connect with others in the field.
Absolutely, yeah. It's just, and you see so much of that happening here. As you see people, you're standing in the lobby, and you've got somebody from your home state of Tennessee, from my home state of Wisconsin, haven't seen each other maybe for 3 or 4 years through the pandemic, and they're like old friends, and they met at a conference a few years ago, and it really is kind of this, this brotherhood, sisterhood, this family of career technical education that you see here at the show.
The other advantage that the ACTE has, I believe, is utilizing the talent, utilizing our membership to inform us of what's happening in the field, and we take the information and the feedback from our membership, and that's how we design the programming that occurs at Vision. So it's not that folks sitting in an office in Alexandria, Virginia, where our headquarters are located,
right,
saying this is what we think is best. We actually utilize our members and their voice and let them tell us what they need for programming and professional development, and then we try to make good on our promise of delivering high-quality PD for career and technical educators.
Yeah, listening to the voice of the customer. In your case, the customer is a CTE educator, and you're, I'm sure, really excited about the next phase of this organization when your presidency starts in the month of July next year. As I was talking to Scott Stone yesterday, the current president joined us for an episode of the podcast. Interesting, by the way, that you both come from the agricultural end of CTE. I don't know if that's a coincidence or.
It is a coincidence.
Okay.
Actually, I met Scott through ACTE.
Oh, did you?
I did, but it is a coincidence that I would say the majority of presidents through ACTE have not come from agricultural education, but here we are.
Yep, absolutely. And as I talked about with Scott actually yesterday, I grew up as a city kid, but all of my cousins grew up on farms in Southwest Minnesota. This was my favorite place to spend time in the summer. Actually, was on their farms. And then looking at the way that technology has changed the world of agriculture is just, we could spend a whole podcast episode just talking about that, and we'll continue to change it. But I want to talk now about your term as president. It's a one-year term. There's only so much you can get done in a year. I know that you're part of that kind of leadership for 3 years as president-elect, then president, and then past president. And you've got a really strong board that supports all the work that you're doing. But if you think about that 12 months that you'll serve as president of this great organization, Chaney, tell me a little bit about what you'd like to see accomplished during that period of time.
Sure. There are two things that I really hope to focus on during my year as president. So one of the opportunities as the incoming president that you have is to identify the training opportunity for the entire board. And I have quite a bit of experience, not just in education, but in other organizations serving on boards of directors. And through the Tennessee STEM Education Center, TSEC, a few years ago, I had the opportunity to experience a systems thinking training.
Okay.
I'd never been introduced to systems thinking or approaching the problem-solving process through the lens of systems thinking, and it was incredible.
10 seconds on what systems thinking is for maybe and I don't know if you can squeeze it into 10 seconds.
I don't know that I can, but I'll try. But the systems thinking requires you to really look at a problem of practice or a question from all different avenues, and instead of jumping right into possible solutions, ensuring that you're thinking about what's happened in the past, what resources exist, things like that.
Perfect.
And hearing multiple perspectives to inform the decision-making process.
I love it.
So as the leader of the board for the next year when I step into the term of president, systems thinking is the training that I would like our board to receive, and then adopt that as our approach during board meetings and as we're looking for creative solutions to challenges we're experiencing as an organization. Individually, though, my individual contribution when I step away and I think, what legacy did I leave from my time as an officer in ACTE? I hope that it is a legacy that addresses teacher retention by focusing on teacher mental health. Teacher mental health, certainly mental health of everyone is an important issue. I think teacher mental health is a very important issue, and it was possibly elevated during the pandemic. We talked earlier about research that I engage in. Recently, working with 14 colleagues across 13 states and 2 territories in the southern region, we completed a multi-state research study focused specifically on agriculture teachers, school-based agricultural educators, their experiences with suicide, so exposure personally or professionally, as well as their knowledge of farm stressors, things that stress out those in the ag industry or rural areas, and suicide warning signs. More than 1,000 agriculture teachers attempted to participate in this research project.
Wow.
But before they could jump into the research, they had to answer one question. Have you ever felt so isolated or so depressed that you've contemplated suicide? The national average is around 8%. The national adult average of those who've contemplated suicide is around 8%. So we were shocked by the number of individuals who were not able to take or participate in our survey because they clicked yes. 21%.
Wow. More than 1 in 5.
So as a research team, we stepped back. We didn't expect that. That wasn't even one of our research questions. We had a lot of other things we were trying, but it's one of those aha moments that emerged as we need to do something. So another conference happening in tandem with ACTE is the National Association of Agricultural Educators, and our team is delivering 3 workshops focused specifically on agriculture teacher mental health, suicide recognition, warning signs, and where to go for help. I met with leaders in ACTE and shared those results, and the questions that they asked were really good. Wow, do you think this is common among all career and tech ed teachers? What is different about career and technical education than other education? Is this higher than what we might find in other education areas? So those who teach English, math, social studies, physical education. CTE teachers have more different responsibilities than other general education content teachers. They have career and technical student organizations that they have to manage, which comes along with fundraising and filling out field trip forms and training students for competitive events. They have laboratory equipment that must be purchased, that's often expensive, that must be maintained, and sometimes comes with a degree of safety. And so there's a bit of anxiety when you're teaching your students that are 14, 13, 12, 15, 16 years old how to utilize these tools that are potentially life-threatening. So there are some things like that. Often a career tech ed teacher is the only individual in their field in their school, so they may not have a peer across the hall that they can chat with. So working with ACTE, in 2023, we are launching a national study through our membership to identify career and technical education teacher stressors, as well as recognition of warning signs related to suicide and the professional development needs related to mental health. And the results of that study will inform future programming in ACTE for years. And I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, really, really important work. And, as I reflect on what you just said about the mental health aspect of teaching and the systems thinking aspect, maybe using one to understand the other, right?
Yes.
And being able to, if not solve that problem, make big headway in terms of some of those mental health issues. So really, really important work. That's obviously a very bold goal to set, but I think an achievable one. And based on your background, I think you're probably the gentleman to do it. So exciting to see the results and the focus on that. The other exciting thing I think from the standpoint of ACTE Vision this year is just all the new technology that I'm seeing as I walk through the expo. I understand there's over 200 exhibitors here. You've got over 300 concurrent education sessions for our CTE instructors, teachers, professors, and educators. So as you've spent your time here, Chaney, this week here in Las Vegas, is there one thing that maybe sticks out to you that you're like, wow, that is something that's really, really cool that I've learned or I've seen here at Vision?
I have to limit it to one. I will tell you. I'm
watching our producer and saying you can probably squeeze in two as long as you do them quick.
Okay, so I'll go quickly. The robotics is incredible.
Yep.
And robotics spans every career and technical education profession, I believe. So as I walk up and down the aisles and I look at the quality and the level and the types of robotics that are being used in classrooms today, I see a dog walking now that's a live mammal.
How do you know?
Well, judging by the fur, and he's with a security guard, but you go 50 feet to my left, and there are 4 robotic dogs walking
Isn't that
around.
Crazy? Yeah.
And they're not just walking, they're hopping, all 4 legs are off the ground, they're fetching a tree. It's wild.
Right.
So I'm excited about how we're introducing students to technology, especially the field of robotics, and what that might look like for future career and technical education programming.
Absolutely, yeah. It's just been fascinating. I had the same observation, and as you and I are sitting, our audience can't see it, but we're sitting right across the street right across the aisle from a big FANUC robot, a mechatronic system, really, really cool technology, smart sensors, trainers. I mean, it's amazing where this has gone. I've been coming to ACT now to our CareerTech Vision for probably 7-8 years, something like that. And it's just every year that you come back that the technology is just that much further along. So absolutely fascinating. We do have one final question for you, Chaney, as we wrap up our time. It's amazing how quickly a half hour can go when you're talking about somebody doing so many interesting things like you are. But it's a question that we ask every single guest here on the Tech Ed podcast. And from your position at so many different levels of education and such an influencer in terms of what's going on here at a national scale in career technical education, if there was one piece of advice that you could give to a high school sophomore, what would that be, Chaney?
Yeah. Explore your interest. Whatever that may be, take time to explore your interest. And through that exploration, you might find that something you think you're interested in is actually not what you're interested in at all.
Sure.
Or you may discover a passion that you didn't know existed. And so beyond exploring personal interest, I think I would encourage others to step outside and participate in industry-related field trips or job shadowing opportunities, or just engage with professionals and ask them about the jobs that they do or their careers. Because what I believe, what I know from my experience as a high school teacher is that a sophomore in high school, their scope of career opportunities is so limited to what they see in their immediate families, or what they see on television or in the movies, and what they hear about, right? And so they don't have a large schema for all the opportunities that exist. And so I think career exploration is critically important, so that when they graduate high school, if they are ready to make the decision, either enter the world of work or enter a post-secondary education or training program, but make an informed decision. Without that exploration, I feel like those decisions are not informed.
Absolutely. Great advice from Dr. Chaney Mosley, the assistant professor at Middle Tennessee State University, and the incoming or president-elect of the Association for Career and Technical Education. Chaney, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thanks for having me, Matt.